1975, a 25-year-old engineer at Kodak built the first digital camera in history. It weighed 8 pounds. It captured images at 0.01 megapixels, and it took 23 seconds to save a single photo to a cassette tape. He showed it to his bosses. Their reaction, "That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it." 37 years later, Kodak filed for bankruptcy, destroyed by the technology it created. And then, it sold the patents to the companies that replaced it. To understand how this happened, you need to understand what Kodak was. Not just a company, a civilization. In 1888, a man named George Eastman had an idea that would change how humans remember their lives. He was a bank clerk, 24 years old. He worked nights in his mother's kitchen, experimenting with chemicals and photographic plates, sometimes falling asleep on the floor beside the stove. His invention, a camera anyone could use. Price, $25. His promise, you press the button, we do the rest. By 1900, Kodak released the Brownie, a camera that cost $1. Over $150,000 sold in the first year. Photography was no longer a profession. It was a hobby, a memory, a birthright. And Kodak owned all of it. By 1976, Kodak controlled 90% of the film market in the United States and 85% of the camera market. The word Kodak became a verb. Kodaking meant taking photos, the way Googling means searching today. Kodak moment entered the English language. In Rochester, New York, you couldn't walk 2 blocks without meeting someone who worked at Kodak. 6,400 employees in one city. The company was the city. At its peak in 1996, $16 billion in annual revenue, $31 billion market cap, stock price above $94, 145,300 employees worldwide, and the margins on film. 70 cents of every dollar went straight to Kodak's pocket. 70%. But inside one of those factories, a 25-year-old engineer was about to build something that would terrify everyone in the building. Steve Sasson graduated from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute with a master's in electrical engineering. He joined Kodak's research lab in June 1973. He was 23 years old. His supervisor, Gareth Lloyd, gave him a simple assignment: investigate a new kind of sensor called a CCD, a charged-coupled device. Nobody asked him to build a camera. Nobody even knew he was building one. He pulled a lens from a broken Super 8 movie camera he found in a parts bin. He wired up 16 nickel-cadmium batteries. He soldered together 6 circuit boards. He connected a Philips cassette recorder for storage. The result weighed 8 pounds. It looked like a toaster wrapped in wires. It recorded one black and white image, 100 by 100 pixels, onto a standard audio cassette. The process took 23 seconds. Sasson's first test subject was Joy Marshall, a technician working nearby. He pointed the camera at her. 23 seconds later, an image appeared on a television monitor. Her hair was visible. The background was clear. Her face was a smear of white pixels. The software had a bug. It was reading the image bits in the wrong order. Instead of fixing the code, Sasson physically swapped the wires. It was easier to reverse wires than change the software, he later said. Marshall looked at the screen and gave her verdict: needs work. But this wasn't a failure. This was the first digital photograph in history. December 1975. Sasson presented the camera to Kodak's leadership. He expected excitement. What he got was silence. They simply asked me why anybody would want to take a picture this way, he recalled, when there was nothing wrong with conventional photography. Kodak filed the patent US 4,131,919 in May 1977. They titled it Electronic Still Camera, not digital. The word digital was considered too threatening, too real. Then they buried it, because digital photography would destroy the business of film. Vince Baraba, conducted a formal study. His conclusion: digital will replace film, but Kodak has roughly 10 years to prepare. 2 warnings, 2 timelines, both astonishingly accurate. Kodak used the decade to improve film quality instead. That was the invention. Here's what Kodak did with it, or rather, what they refused to do. In 1995, Kodak released the DC-40, one of the first consumer digital cameras. Price, $849. Resolution, less than half a megapixel. No LCD screen. You couldn't even see what you'd photographed. Kodak treated it like a novelty, a sideshow. Meanwhile, Sony, Canon, and Nikon were investing everything they had into digital. The difference? Those companies made cameras and lenses. They didn't make film. They had nothing to lose. Kodak had everything to lose. Film generated 70% gross margins. Every roll sold anywhere in America put 70 cents of every dollar directly into Kodak's pocket. Digital cameras, Kodak sold them at a loss, roughly $60 per unit in the red. This is the innovator's dilemma in its purest form. How do you destroy your most profitable product to chase a technology that doesn't make money yet? The answer for most companies is you don't. Between 1980 and 1990, Kodak invested roughly $5 billion in digital technology, 45% of their entire research budget. They weren't blind, they were paralyzed. But the worst decision Kodak ever made wasn't burying the camera. It was what they did in 2001. In 2001, Kodak bought a company called Ofoto, an online photo sharing platform. 1.2 million registered users, people uploading their pictures, organizing them, sharing them with friends and family. Kodak looked at this platform, a social network built around photographs, and decided its purpose was to help people order prints. They turned a photo sharing website into a print ordering service. The platform grew to 75 million users, and every single feature, every update, every marketing dollar was aimed at one goal: getting people to print more photos on Kodak paper. In 2005, Kodak hit a milestone, #1 in digital camera sales in the United States, 24.9% market share, 7.05 million cameras shipped to American retailers, ahead of Canon, ahead of Sony. That same year, Kodak reported a loss of $1.3 billion. They had won the race, but the race led off a cliff, and then the cliff arrived. On June 29, 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and introduced the iPhone. It had a camera, not a great one, but it was always in your pocket. Within 2 years, the entire compact camera industry began to collapse. At its peak in 2008, the world shipped 120 million digital cameras. By 2021, that number had fallen 97% to 3 million. Smartphones didn't just replace film, they replaced cameras. Kodak saw it happening. In 2007, they made a decision that still defies logic. They sold their profitable healthcare imaging division, $235 billion, to fund the digital camera business. They sold the horse that was winning to bet more on the horse that was losing. In 2004, Kodak had been removed from the Dow Jones Industrial Average after 74 years. In 2009, they discontinued Kodachrome, the most iconic film in history. Also, after 74 years, in 2010, they were dropped from the S&P 500. The stock told the whole story. In early 1997, $94.75 a share. On January 4th, 2012, it fell to 78 cents, a 28% drop in a single day on bankruptcy rumors. 15 days later, it was official. January 19th, 2012, 1 a.m. Eastman Kodak Company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. 19,000 employees remained, down from 145,300 at its peak. Rochester took the blow hardest. In 1982, Kodak employed 60,400 people in the city. By 2016, that number was 1,600. The city's poverty rate climbed above 30%. Shops closed, restaurants closed, entire neighborhoods went quiet. Imagine, you worked at Kodak for 30 years, your father worked at Kodak, your mortgage, your pension, your kids' college fund, all tied to one company, and one Monday morning, someone tells you the company doesn't exist anymore. In March 2012, two deals closed within weeks of each other. Kodak sold Ofoto, now called Kodak Gallery, with 75 million users, to Shutterfly. Price, $23.8 million. That same month, Facebook bought Instagram. 13 employees, no revenue. Price, $1 billion. Same product. Photo sharing. Opposite understanding of what it meant. In December 2012, Kodak sold its patent portfolio, over 1,100 patents covering digital imaging, to a consortium that included Apple, Google, Microsoft, Samsung, Facebook, and Amazon. The price they'd hoped for, $2.6 billion. The price they got, $525 million. The technology Kodak invented, the technology they feared, the technology they buried, now belonged to the companies that buried them. So was Kodak blind? Actually, no. They saw everything. That's what makes this story so much worse. The easy version of this story is that Kodak didn't see the future, but that's not true. They saw it before anyone else. They invented the digital camera. They invested $5 billion in digital research. They were the #1 seller of digital cameras in America. They owned a photo sharing platform with 75 million users. They saw every turn in the road and still drove off the cliff. Harvard Business Review put it plainly. Kodak created a digital camera, invested in the technology, and even understood that photos would be shared online. Where they failed was in realizing that online photo sharing was the new business, not just a way to expand the printing business. Two Kodak employees saw the future with startling precision. Larry Madison in 1979 drew a timeline predicting consumers would fully